Welcome to the Feed Central Hay Matters podcast, your go-to source for all things hay-related in Australia. I'm your host, John Paul Driver. In today's episode, we're joined by Malcolm May, and Tim Ford is also joining us for the first part of this. Tim, do you want to introduce Malcolm?
Yeah, thanks, John Paul. Great to be here. Introduce to the audience Malcolm May. Malcolm will be well known to many people that have been in the hay industry for some time. Malcolm is a true pioneer in the export hay industry, true visionary for our industry. It's and as the one of the founders of Balco, being a very significant hay export business today. So I'll hand over to yourself, John Paul, and Malcolm. I'll just say that Malcolm's a true pioneer and a true visionary in our industry. Malcolm has always given me an enormous amount of time, been a great person in our industry, bringing the industry together in Australia, bringing the exporters and the domestic players together, bringing the export players together. Been a great friend and mentor of mine over the years. So welcome to the podcast, Malcolm.
Malcolm, Tim just gave you a wonderful introduction. Can you take us to where all of this started?
Right. Yeah, I guess the easiest way to say I live at Balaklava, 100 kilometres north of Adelaide. I'm a third-generation farmer and I have two sons on my farm now, fourth generation. I love country. I love Balaklava. We started in the hay industry because we could see the need. Some of the things I've done before is that I was a foundation member of the Pea Growers Co-op. We were growing peas and not getting a very good presence in the marketplace. We got a group together. We ended up with 400 people right throughout South Australia. And now the industry is respected and they do their own storage and goodness knows what. So I've been sort of early with some of these things, really, and it's the same with the hay industry. Our farm's been in our family for 100 years. Matter of fact, my father's 100 and he was born on the property, so he's still going. So maybe I've got a few more years too.
Oh, wonderful.
If I wanted to look at our farm now, we used to be a mixed farm, like fallow, wheat, pasture and have livestock, but now we're continuously crop. We've got about 4 or 5 different things we grow, and hay is one of those. Oat and hay is a very important part to our, program.
Let's dive into the export hay side of things. When did that start?
The export hay industry itself started in the late 80s, and we had a company up at Wallaroo where we were supplying round rolls for export, and I just thought this is a little bit ridiculous going away from the export market to come straight past us back to export. And that was the logic. But it was sort of deeper than that because we've been talking as a community, how do we get our community going? And we started an economic development board in Balaklava and we weren't getting anyone come here. In one of the meetings as I was chair, I said, hands up, who wants to start a business? We started with 4 of us. My brother-in-law that was in livestock marketing, Murray Mickle, that was a machinery agent, Jess Spencer that was a primary school headmaster, and me as a farmer. And we actually both went out and grabbed $50,000 each from our bank and started Balco. And it was sort of our introduction from doing the hay ourselves, and this looked like an expanding market, but it was also a community help thing because there was a lot of unemployment, there's a lot of kids in Balaklava, and that, quite frankly, was our driver, was our community.
What was happening in the bush at that time?
Well, things were fairly tough, really. Even unemployment was tough too. And farming wasn't too bad, but you've got to have a bigger community. It's got to be bigger than just yourself. So this was part of this, was to try and create an industry that could be grown in our area and wider, I guess, which it has shown. Started from 20 or 30,000 tonne and now between 1 and 2 million tonne. We just needed jobs. And since Balco started, we've encouraged other people to come here with their businesses, and we've got quite a good little group here now of in the pig industry, the chook industry, growing mushrooms, grain packing, the rail industry. Balco was the seed for a lot of this to try and encourage other people. We're involved in 2 or 3 of those things, but we're a seed to encourage people to come here. Even now, we have meetings every couple of months, and just recently when things were a bit tough, I said to the guys, righto, our community wants you to actually either double up, your production or introduce us to other people that want to come to our community. And that's sort of the attitude that we've had. Plus, I believe a lot of these industries that come here, the bosses need someone to support them. They need that sort of help and friendship to feel part of our community, so they want to grow and support this community. But we've been very community focused, I guess, our business.
It's nice to have peers as you're growing and developing a business.
Yeah, it is, really. I used to have a mentor myself here, and he was a very helpful person to me too. He was very conservative, and I used to talk to him, and it was quite good that I used to be able to bounce ideas from him, and he'd sort of give me a yes or no, or I don't know about that, Malcolm. And so it was quite good, really. But you need that sort of support.
I am a firm believer in acknowledging our mentors. Who was that?
This guy was Terry Howard, and he was a hairdresser. And he also threw out, he was a newspaper guy too, like he supplied the paper in our community. And but he was just a really good guy, and he was patient, and he used to listen, and he used to throw in constructive criticism and positive things too, I might add.
Sure.
So, no, it's just part of the community.
Isn't that amazing how a mentor can be just about anybody?
Yeah, exactly. No, they've just got to be good people.
Take me through the building of Bowman's.
Well, if I could, Bowman's, the site, is where Balco actually makes hay now for export. There's a grain packer there, and there's a company called Bowman's Rail, which our family is the major shareholder in that, to run that, to take the containers down to the port. No, if I look at it, Bowman's, or Balco rather, started in 1990 with those guys I was talking about. Balco stands for Balaklava Company, like our local community, so Balaklava Company. We started first of selling grain for leaf grain, buying grain for leaf grain. And then we met a guy that had a mobile hay press, and we actually got hay pressed in people's paddocks, like small bales. And we met a guy that had done some marketing, and we had him come on side. And we just gradually built this relationship up with people and then expanded. And our first hay press was at a place called Clare, about 30 or 40 kilometres from where we are now. But we eventually moved to Bowman's, just outside of Balaklava, and there's a couple of reasons why. Because this was our local home town, but it was also where there was a railway line to the ships to be able to export. But on the way through, we actually joined with some farmers, and we bought out a company called Charlix over at Wallaroo, maybe 5 or 6 years into when we got started ourselves. And we had a group of farmers over there as a joint venture doing York Peninsula hay. Eventually, we took that over as far as Balco was concerned, and they became shareholders in Balco. So we've had this growth thing, like there was a group down in York Peninsula, everyone else here, whereas Balco now has got hay plants in 3 states, and are doing very well.
What are the opportunities in hay and ag looking to the future?
Well, I'm pretty excited about agriculture in general, really. I've got 2 sons. I don't really do any work on a farm now, really. They won't let me drive a tractor or anything. But I'm really excited about the future, because technology, where we're actually going with technology, is just mind-boggling about, how they sow their crops and the accuracy of GPS and everything like that. And also research and development, what's on the horizon that they can do. And that's one thing the hay industry's got to be mindful of, because if I look at when we started Balco in 1990-91, even farmers, they didn't really look at gross margins on their property or the margin on their property. They sort of just grew things because that's what they traditionally did. Whereas now, there's an accuracy of how they do the work. There's gross margins on each one, and hay or whatever you do has got to be competitive to fit that mould. And in the original thing, we were growing hay because it was in our rotation, and we used to grow it for many generations. Before Balco, we used to actually grow a bit of hay and sell it to the abattoirs in Adelaide. My father used to do that, and so we've been into hay for a long time. So when I look at it, what's the opportunities of agriculture? I think in dryland agriculture, where we're up to now, is very good. The hay industry has to sort of keep up with research and development. They haven't been quite as aggressive with that in the recent years, I don't think, as they had been before. And some of the things we've done as an industry, we actually got together, worked together to actually, and charge farmers a commission, or whatever you like to call it. There's a name for it.
Levy is what
levy, yes. Yeah. They charge the levy, and the whole industry worked together to actually help with new varieties and everything. They formed a company, matter of fact, called AEXCO, and that was money going in there for development, working with their breeders and everything, and that was quite good. And I think that's still going, because I've been out of the industry now for 5 or 6 years. So I'm not. Rob will tell you more about that. I reckon the hay business, the beauty of hay, it started, if I look, we were doing round rolls, which is pretty slow and everything. We were doing big squares like 4x4s, and now we do 3x4s, and we really make hay really quick. We got the right weight to go on trucks and everything. So there's a lot of pluses about why the hay industry is better to be in now than it was 20 years ago. But there's still going to have to be some improvements for that to be like that. You know, there's going to have to be just better things within our industry to make it work better, if you know what I mean. Yeah, I just think that it's part of a rotation. The hay industry's really got to be competitive, and it's really got to meet a need. One of the things my lads quite like about it is it's the first bit of income for dryland farming that comes in. So timing of the cash flow, that comes in October, November, whereas our grain harvest comes in December, and that's a real important point, why it's important to what's good about the industry. There's always change. If you actually look at the industry, there's a massive amount of change. I reckon that you'll eventually see hay will get mixed with some other products in Australia where we're growing them. Even the seaweed contact for cows belching and everything like that. We grow it here, it can be mixed with the hay and it can be exported. Or even barley, like crushed barley, can go at a certain number of kilos per bale. And to me, that's a sort of a trend line that could happen, is value adding the hay that's exported. But the farmer, they've got to feel part of this. The other thing you've got to do is you've got to keep the farmers working or having a vision about what's the next thing for them to do. That's one thing the industry's got to do, is keep just refreshing itself, but actually encouraging people that there's a future and it's a good part of what you're doing for the next 10 years. If I look around Balaklava, there's industries that run for 30, 40 years and eventually they become obsolete. And one thing the hay industry's got to look at is that they don't become obsolete, or there's a different way of doing it. How do they change? There are a few things now, like there's quite the cost of doing hay and bringing it to a plant and manufacturing it. Could it be that they're dealing closer with farmers? One of my pet things I reckon they should be doing is bales are 4 foot wide. They should be 3 foot 10 inches wide, so that they both slide into a container, like big bales, push them into a container. And these 4 by 3s, or it should be 3 foot 10 by 3s, go 3 high. If they were just compressed a bit more, straight from the farmer, it could go into a container and go for export.
The Crone high density bales they're pushing the bounds of density where you could just load them into a container and you would be better off than having run them through the press.
Yeah, and what it boils down to is that is change, but the balers need to be narrow, because see they were 4 foot, so they fit on a combing rail, an 8 foot truck. I reckon eventually they'll have it that you've got side curtains on trucks, so there's not so much waste or fluff blowing on the ground, straw blowing on the ground. And so if they're narrower, they'll fit inside of them. They'll fit inside of containers. And that's a bit of a risk to the main industry like Balco and Gilmac and Johnson's. If they can go straight from farmers and don't need that value add, it's a risk. Other than they've got the market and everything, there's more than likely still a place for them. But people just need to look a little bit wider than they are and see what they're going to do. The only thing that happens with like Balco's plants is that they bring hay in, and on their feeder beds into the plant, they've actually got 4 bales going in at once.
Right.
And they can actually blend them up,
Yep.
a damaged side on one side from sun or whatever, and they blend the hay to give a fairly good product. So that's an important thing. But some of the stuff could actually it goes straight in a container and to a market. And that's one of the biggest risks, because all of a sudden if you can fit 24 or 5 tonne in a 40-foot container,
You're there.
a little bit narrow, like you're there. And you cut out a lot of people. All you need then is a marketer. And that's not good for the industry we've got now. But it changes.
What would you say about the quality control that happens at the press versus those uncompressed bales?
Well, at the moment, all hay, they go and inspect the Balco. Let's look at Balco, because I know it. They go out to the paddocks and they actually inspect the hay when it's growing, look for contamination and everything. They talk to farmers, and then when it's cut, they just keep looking all the time, and then they actually go and core hay out in the paddock before it actually goes into the production shed or into the farmers' sheds. So they know the quality out there, but what it boils down to, once they've got the quality, they've got samples of everyone's hay in a room here at Balco. Once they know qualities, they can say, I can mix your hay and this hay together, and I'll come up with a very good sample for this grade. And that's the difference compared to straight out of the farmer's shed, that you haven't got that versatility. But 20, 30% or 40%, some years nearly 80%, could go straight from a farmer's shed because it is very good. But sometimes, to meet a market, you've got to be able to blend product together. So there's a balance, but what I'm saying is in Balaklava, there were industries here that have now disappeared that really, with the hay industry, it could change, and the Balcos of the world have got to change to keep up. But I reckon that's going to be an opportunity for farmers. And then our family, we're looking at how do you value add different things. My daughter-in-law is doing a little bit of flour milling at the moment for durum wheat to get semolina and sell it for pizza making to high-end restaurants. So there's this, how do you take it to the next step? How do you increase your value? And agriculture is really, technology, everything's growing really fast, and it's quite exciting.
I have this question that I ask my mentors. Can you give us a thought around a particularly difficult time and how you managed through it?
Yeah, more about the community. Yeah, I used to just bounce off of him, and that is a good point. I've got people I suppose I do talk to about that now, that I know in the community, and I'm fairly open. It doesn't particularly worry me what people know about me. I'm just quite happy. I've got more than likely half a dozen guys I talk to about my own business now. See, I'm in charge of Bowman's Rail. Well, that's doing it pretty tough at the moment, but I've got a group of mentors that I talk to about what should I do, and I find that very helpful. And actually, I do it to people in Balaklava. I'm in a building in the bottom floor from where I am. There's a flower shop in there, and I actually help these girls in a few different ways in the building and a few things. And it was what I found really good. One of the fathers of the local football match come up and said, "You don't know me, but I want to say thank you for what you did for my daughter." And but I do a bit of that in the town really, because I'm on the local council, I'm on the regional development board. I'm quite heavily involved, and so is my family and the community as well.
Leaning into community and mentors is your advice when it comes to tough times.
Yeah, it does, because a problem solved is half the problem, isn't it?
Yes.
And sometimes you think you know, but you just need someone to say something and go, yes, that's right. It just takes you in another way, and you've got to realise that you just need help. You're not that smart in your corner if you just stay in your corner and think you're going to solve everything. It doesn't work. And it's the same for the hay industry. And that's one of the things we've done very well, I think, as far as Balco. We've actually evolved everyone else in the hay industry. These guys have all their competition. We've been very influential, I think, in forming an industry of working together. I know you're talking to Dennis Johnson later on, but he was on it for a little while, and then I was on the Fodder Industry Association, and we formed an Exporters Association. And then as we needed money, I knew which exporters to ask, how about dobbing in 10,000? and others I knew it wouldn't work. Whereas then, by now, say 10 years later, they're all working a lot better together, and they've got some common goals, even though they're competition. And even in the early days, we went over to Japan together, and presented, found customers, and we're great mates. Rob will talk about it with Balco. They have the Hay Cup with Johnson's, play quarterly golf. So it's a lot of fun, as well as, a lot of business is done too. But anyhow.
Do you have any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I think the hay industry, it's been a great success story, really, in agriculture. Like, as far as getting export, I was tied up with a company called P and Grain Exporters, and the old guys there said, "Oh God, you've got to be careful in exporting." But one thing about hay, it has to be compressed in the country of origin to actually make it economic to export it. So it's been a pretty good pretty good thing to do. But now the market is catching up. We're baling and we're crimping all the hay so it dries quicker. We've got balers, high density balers. That helps, and we're putting out, say, 80 bales an hour. You're over doubling your production with your machinery, and then you're filling your trucks to take anywhere chock-a-block, and it's taken to the next level. So the things are, margining down. The hay industry will be here for a long time, but because there's markets overseas and there's a real need for marketers. But you just got to keep in mind on what's going to happen with it, because the domestic side of it, with how efficient farmers are, is catching up with why these guys have got their sheds and big presses. There's a fine line. But, it's been a great industry, and it's been great for our community. Balco are here in Balaklava, and Gilmac have got a hay plant here as well. There's healthy competition, mainly in Victoria, Western Australia and South Australia for the export market, a little bit in New South Wales. But it's been a good value-add market as an extension to a farmer, because you've actually got to go back to the farm. Why does someone want to grow it, and where's the market, and how do you get there, and where do I fit? That's what it is.
Malcolm, this has been a wonderful conversation, and thank you very much for your thoughts. Again, I've been joined by Malcolm May, an export hay industry pioneer, and I really appreciate it. And I want to say a special thank you for your comments around an industry that needs constant refreshing, that sense of community. I really appreciate that.
Well, thank you very much for your interview, and good luck with the rest of them. They're more than likely to be a lot smarter than this one.